Hey everybody, it's Ace here. Ratchet and Clank is probably my favorite video game franchise of all time, and it's about time I ranked which games are the best and which are the worst. So, without further ado, let's get started with the game that started it all, Ratchet and Clank. Now, this game is a great mix of exploration and gunplay combat. A perfect synergy, if you will. It also introduces us to the Galactic Duo themselves and a bunch of other wacky characters along the way. But if I had to be honest with you, I'd have to put it somewhere in the B tier. It just has some things that are missing that could make it a little bit better. The obvious being the lack of strafe run and how low the health is. So that's kind of what's holding it back, at least for me. Is it playable? Of course, obviously it is. But is this the one I go back to the most out of the original trilogy? No, not really. That goes to our next game, Going Commando, which is obviously getting an S tier. This is the one that I've played first and the one that I've played the most out of honestly all of them. It's upgraded a lot of the problems I had in the first game and added some new fun twists. We've got weapon upgrades, we got the strafe run, we got spaceship combat, we got races. It's got a lot of awesome additions and a wondrous anime variety to go with it, and many new toys, and even old ones. So I have to put this in the S tier because this is what I would think a gold standard Ratchet and Clank should be like. Now, moving on to Up Your Arsenal, this being the third out of the trilogy, I'd have to put it in the A tier. Sure, we got even cooler weapons and more awesome characters to love. This is when Dr. Nefarious comes into play as well. Some things can kind of hold it back. For me, there's a few planets in this game that are essentially just specifically based on sort of arena style fighting. So planets like Blackwater City, which was home to the whole hoverboard races, have essentially been neutered. Essentially just for multiplayer purposes, and I never got to play the multiplayer, nor do I really care for multiplayer in story-based games. So this kind of stuff really takes this down a bit. Is the game still good? Absolutely, but it just misses out on the S tier. Moving on to Deadlocked. Deadlocked is going straight in the middle. Not perfect, but not terrible. It's more of a combat style game, so a lot of the platforming doesn't really happen here. Especially because of the fact that you don't have Clank, so a lot of your maneuverability has been limited. So there's that. But also, these two are a dynamic duo, so when you focus on one of them in a game and the other is essentially just put on the old fence, it kind of drags it down for me. You can't have one without the other. It just feels weird. Moving on, Ratchet and Clank Size Matters. Oh boy. This one is going straight into the D tier. The first PSP game, if I recall, and it's got some problems. One of those problems obviously being that your weapons are essentially just toothpicks compared to enemies, and honestly probably the best weapon out of the game is the Rhino, and seeing as you're not getting the Rhino, because how much that thing costs, a whopping 10 million bolts, you're gonna be stuck and beat up. Sure, I did think the customizable armor and stuff was cool, but that's not enough to save it, and the villain honestly wasn't all that great either. So this one is going on the very low end side. Moving on, our first E tier, the bottom of the bottom, Secret Agent Clank. Now, this is the problem of splitting the duo up. Now, I get story purpose wise, but it's not the best, as there's some things in the story that don't make sense. Secret Agent Clank was a show, but this game tries to play it off as that he's always been a secret agent, which kind of doesn't make sense to the continuity of the series at all. Add that with some weird combat and singing sections with Quark, certain QTE bits, and this game honestly just feels like one of the lower points this franchise has been at. Now, thankfully, things pick up in Ratchet and Clank Tools of Destruction. Now, if I had to think about it honestly, Tools of Destruction, while fun at times, I'm gonna have to put it in the C tier. Mainly because First of all, the final boss is honestly one of the hardest ones in this series for no reason, honestly, because he'll do a lot of damage to you, and your ways of getting ammo and healing are minuscule, so you will easily lose a lot of time here. There's also plenty of points in this where checkpoints are not really the friendliest, as you'll lose a lot of progress here. But it does introduce a lot of new concepts that will come into play later on. Which, speaking of that, let's move on to our next game, Ratchet and Clank Quest for Booty. Honestly, I'm just gonna put this in the D tier. Again, it's another problem of splitting the dynamic duo up. Now, I'm not holding it back in this case simply because it's a part of a grander scheme for the future trilogy, but it causes you to have a lack of maneuverability like the original trilogy would have. But the main issue, this game is just short. If honestly, you could probably beat this like 2-3 hours at most. And seeing as how the main villain is sort of a split job between one of the main or side antagonists from Tools of Destruction, it loses out on a lot of its good quality to me. If this game was a bit longer, that'd be better. Also, the fact that you only get probably like 5 or 6 weapons, and those aren't even new weapons. They're just a few from Tools of Destruction anyway, so there's not a lot of new stuff. And sure, you get to chase across islands and stuff, but it's not like you're exploring a whole planet like with the other games. The exploration is not that much, so this game is going a little low here. Now, moving on to Ratchet and Clank: A Crack in Time. This game is getting right into the B tier for me. I love the story for A Crack in Time. I love that they brought back space combat into this and more exploration across. I love that they brought back space exploration and space combat into this franchise here. We get to meet the second Lombax we've seen in this universe, Azimuth, who's a more tragic character, and we get more Dr. Nefarious. But this was probably going to be the original end of this franchise. And I would have thought that this would have been a nice way to end off the series. So the reason it's in B tier is because, well, seeing as the series is still going on, it kind of takes away from the ending just a little bit. Now, moving on to Ratchet and Clank, All for One, and Ratchet and Clank, Full Frontal Assault. Honestly, All for One is going in the D tier. I don't care for this sort of like co-op-y style of Ratchet and Clank. I get what they're going for, but this isn't for me. Especially because why on earth would you team up with Dr. Nefarious after everything that's happened? It just feels kind of weird to me. Like, I know that there's a Crash game where you essentially work together with Cortex, but I didn't really care for that either, so I feel that this game sort of reminds me of that, with just adding more multiplayer mechanics, which detract from this game a lot. Now, as for its sister game, Ratchet and Clank Full Frontal Assault, that's going down right into the E tier. I don't like the sort of like tower defense-y type of combat that this game sort of works with here, as it takes away from the main core mechanics that Ratchet and Clank usually go for. Also, the villain for this game sucks balls, and the fact that he essentially gets honored in the Hall of Villains is a real disappointment here. Also, a lot of the weapons in this game aren't new weapons. Again, they're more just ones brought over from the future series, so this is a real detraction for me. Anyway, next up, Ratchet and Clank Into the Nexus. Now, Into the Nexus, if I had to think of where to put this, I would put this smack dab in the middle. Again, it's an okay game. There's some new toys and stuff. Kronk and Zephyr's death is tragic. The Progs are great villains, but I'm putting this low because the Progs essentially get removed as main villain tier for some beast from another dimension that you can't even understand its language. So that really hurts. Again, this is also a very short game, probably only like 2 hours longer or so than Quest for Booty, so that also detracts, and there's not that many planets to explore. So while it's got its good moments, it's held back by length and a few other things that. So while this game, in my opinion, is better than Quest for Booty, it's still losing a lot of points for length, villains, and certain story bits. Now, from there, we have Ratchet and Clank 2016, or essentially the remake. And the remake, oh boy, as controversial as it may seem to some, I'd have to put this at least in the B tier. The reason for this is the fact that at the end of the day, it's still a fun game to play. A lot more so than some of the games that I've talked about today. Now, why it's not getting A or S is simply because the story sucks. Like, I'm just going to tell you what this. The story is based more on the movie, and if most of you remember, the movie was also not good. So, this game suffers from having that plot. Like, it's nice seeing Dr. Nefarious, but the fact that he essentially takes over main villain role for this game sucks because Drac was already a good villain before. So essentially just kicking him to the curb does not sit well with me. There's also a few planets that essentially get cut from this that I miss, so this is what keeps it from being S tier. While it's fun to play, is it a good representation of what the original game was? Not so much. Now, our final game on the list, Ratchet and Clank, A Rift Apart, and honestly speaking, I'm gonna have to put this right up there in the A tier. Ratchet and Clank, A Rift Apart is a fantastic game that takes full capabilities of the PS5 into account. It's got some awesome weapons in here. I love seeing a lot of the new characters in this, like alt versions of our favorite characters. Rivet is a great introduction to the series, and there's so much to do. So I love that this game is here. Now, what keeps it from being in the S tier, you may ask? Well, if I had to say, maybe a few more planets could be in there, but more importantly, the fact that we still don't even get to see the Lombax's planet or what they're up to is honestly what drags this down for me the most, because I feel like it's missed potential. Or more so the fact that we're just kind of getting the old middle finger again. This being the third game that has done this with meeting the Lombaxes. Now this is just a nitpicky thing for me, but it keeps it from being in the S tier as a whole. And there you have it. This is essentially my tier list for what I feel each of these Ratchet and Clanks deserve to be at. Now, obviously, I'm not counting the mobile games in these because I don't play those. Because I feel like mobile versions of these games would not be great. So if I had to put them anywhere, I'd probably put them just in the D tier, if anything. Like, they're not great games, mind you, but they're not worse than these two that I already have at the bottom. So, what are you guys' thoughts? Would you put these Ratchet and Clank games anywhere different than I did? If you did, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about it, because I could talk about this franchise for a long time, or forever if I could. And until the next time, I've been Ace. Thank you for joining me for my tier list, and I will see you guys next time. Take care, and have a quartastic day. Bye-bye.